Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and happy end of NaNoWriMo! I cannot believe that NaNoWriMo is finished. NaNoWriMo 2019, here we are, end of the month. We're done, guys. It's so crazy. If you're new to my channel, my name is Joanna G. Holden, and I am a fantasy author and an author tuber. My series focuses largely on fantasy writing, novel writing, and how to write a series, because I'm all about them epic fantasy sagas. So if you're new, please feel free to subscribe. You can go check out my other videos. I have lots of playlists available. And there are also lots of fun things over on my author website. I have some workbooks that were recently completed. I very soon will have a fully completed world building workbook for those of you who may be doing a giant, maybe a space opera or a high fantasy saga, whatever is going on in your world. If you need some world building tips, I have a huge, very thorough, very fun and exciting and inspiring world building workbook that is a free download over my website. So all the links for that is in the description box below. And click the little bell if you want to get the video uploads as soon as they go up, because I'm not sure during the month of December if I will be posting more than one video a week, but because I'll be traveling, they may not always be on exactly like Saturday every week. So this week's video is all about my NaNoWriMo experience this year and how vastly different it has been from the past 3 years, 2016, 2017, and 2018, all in contrast to 2019. What I did differently this year, and how I feel like I was just in a very different place, all the different things that made it possible for me to win this year as opposed to the last 3 years. So let's jump right in, shall we? I feel like I need to throw this in as like a caveat or a disclaimer or something maybe, but there are maybe a lot of things other than just the project itself that may keep you from winning Nano. And I know that last year that was definitely me, and the year before that was definitely me. I have been in a season for the last several years of a lot of change, a lot of upheaval, a lot of emotions, a lot of drama. Add to that the fact that I have, moved 3 times in the last 3 years. I have had, I've had 3 pregnancies and 4 years of marriage, previous these last 2 years. And of course, last year I had my daughter's 2-year birthday. My youngest 2-year birthday is coming up in January. So a lot of crazy things happened. None of that is to be an excuse. I would say that 75% of the problem every single one of those years was still the project. But just to throw that in there, that sometimes life is crazy, and that can make NaNoWriMo improbable at best, impossible at worst. And so if you are in a place right now where maybe you did not win NaNoWriMo and you're feeling incredibly guilty, I do not want this video to be adding further guilt to you. If you even tried to do NaNoWriMo this year, you should be incredibly proud of yourself. Writing a book is freaking hard. And let alone trying to write 50,000 words of it in 1 month. Now again, I'm throwing out some of the things that I feel like worked for me this year that I changed from the last 3 years, that definitely changed my whole outlook and changed so many aspects of it. I believe that helped me to win it. But if you're in a season like I was in last year, where your life, you literally do not feel like you have any control over anything in your life, and you're in survival mode, you're just struggling to get from one day to the next, take it easy on yourself, take it one day at a time, and do not let guilt take over. Take this as inspiration and maybe some tips for next year, not as a guilt trip. You are doing an amazing job as a writer, and your story is incredible. You just have to give it some time. Okay, so what's the beef with the last 3 years? Let me explain. While I said that there was craziness happening all 3 of those years, and there definitely was, I had the exact same results 3 years running, which tells me that there was something wrong with more than just my inability to keep track of my life at that point in time. There was a fundamental problem with my writing routine, with my writing itself, with the story itself, with the characters, with all of the things that made up the project. That was what was really the problem, and why I was not able to push forward through it. Because let me tell you, back in March and April of this year, when I was supposed to be doing Camp NaNoWriMo and I ended up finishing up a month early, we were still dealing with a lot of fallout from the craziness of fall 2018, when I also epically failed in Nano, and yet I spurred through and wrote an entire 44,000 word book in March. More on that story in another video later to come. So I know that it wasn't just my life. A large portion, again, probably 75% of it, was the project itself. And that is what I want to talk about right now. So 2016, 2017, and 2018 every single year I came in with between 20 and 25,000 words of draft, and then I was done. Every single time I hit a wall and I couldn't finish. In 2016, I was starting a project and the writing was so epically terrible, and the story felt so dry and the characters felt so bland and cliched. I had to stop. I had to stop and just throw up the white flag for a minute and say, okay, we need to backpedal a bit and figure out what's going on with the story. 2017 was a similar situation. I don't remember exactly which part of the novel that I was working on, but I was working on the first half of it. That year, again, a lot of craziness. I was pregnant, but more so I was writing and I just got tired and I got behind and I got discouraged, and so I quit. And then I came back to it again in January. 2018, I was trying to pound out the last couple of chapters of the book. I had hit the halfway mark in the summer and was over the moon about it. I had hit the 3/4 mark only a month before and I was over the moon about it, but I could not for the life of me seem to get Act 3 going. And again, I think with that project, I only got like 15 or 20,000 words. Somewhere in there done on the project before, again, I just had to throw up my hands and say, I don't know where this story is going. I don't know the characters. I don't know. This story is not turning out like I want it to. I need to backpedal and I need to figure out what's going on. So in December, I actually decided to shelve that project temporarily and work on something else to give myself the time that I needed to figure out what was going on with this book that I had at that point been working on for 2 years straight, really. 3 nanos, but about 2 years' time. What happened differently this year that I was able to go from barely being able to finish 15 to 25,000 words over the entire month to being able to cram the entire 50,000 words into less than 3 weeks? What happened? For starters, and this I feel is incredibly important, I had already been writing on a very consistent writing schedule for the entire year previous. In 2016, I had not really done much writing at all the entire year before. It had been 2 years. Yep. Oh my gosh. It had been 2 years since I had written and attempted to self-publish my first novella, a fairy tale retelling called Littlehood. That happened in September of 2014. So it had been over 2 years since I had completed a book project. In 2019, by the time I sat down to start work on Project Ether for November for NaNoWriMo, I had already written the first, second, third, fourth, first, second, third, and fourth drafts of Snowdust, which is a middle grade fantasy novel, which I wrote, that was when I wrote in March. I had written a terrible but usable first draft, or rather more like a 0 draft, of a rewrite of that fairy tale that I was modifying into a middle grade fairy tale novel, Littlehood. And I had already written the first half of the book that I was working on. I had also been working for 2 years solid on trying to develop a stable writing routine and stick to it. And over 2019, I actually succeeded. Not as well, perhaps, as I could have, but I had finished some projects. I was getting my word counts in. I was getting things done. So this year, the writing of NaNoWriMo came at the end of a very successful year. So not only was there the practice and the experience and feeling like I was already in the groove, but there was already a feeling of confidence going into it as well. I feel like in 2016, as soon as I read those words and realized how bad the writing was, I couldn't. I had to stop. In 2017 and in 2018, I was still battling through, I had written and I had been writing, but I had been writing on the same story for so long that it felt very dry. It felt very run down. And also the writing routine just wasn't there. In 2017, again, I was pregnant, so there was exhaustion, but I hadn't been writing steadily because life kept being crazy. And I hadn't learned yet how to manage my time in a way that I could sit down and write every day. I usually write 4 to 5 days a week. Right now, Monday through Friday is my time to write, and I usually write every day on something. And I wasn't doing it at that point. In 2018, I had been working really hard on a schedule, but then we moved, and again, we had some very crazy, chaotic mess happen right after we moved that completely threw me through a loop. I was on the verge of depression. I wasn't actually depressed, but I was on the verge of depression. My schedule was completely out the window. So how could I possibly have a writing routine? This year, 2019, I've had a writing routine, and that changed things so much. It changed things so much. Another thing that I did differently this year as opposed to with my high fantasy series, and this is something that I'm going to touch more on in another video as well, but I knew my target audience. Something that I realized this last December when I shelved the project that for now I'm just going to call Coastlander because that's what it was called at the time, even though it's no longer called that. When I shelved Coastlander, the part of the reason was I knew my story wasn't ringing true, but I didn't know why. I had something in my head, it was very different on paper, and I didn't know what I was missing. And now I have learned, I actually learned this back in July when my computer broke and I couldn't write and I had time to just kind of do whatever I wanted. I worked on the project some and I realized that I didn't know my target audience. I was trying to make it this big, huge, epic fantasy saga that in theory would be just general fiction, adult fantasy. And I was writing the story, a very coming of age YA story for my main character. And that is why there was conflict between what I had in my head and what I had on the paper. I didn't know that I was writing the wrong story or that I was writing it from the wrong perspective. So moving into Project Ether now in 2019, I know very full well that this is an adult high fantasy, not adult, but just it's a general fiction. It's about people who are older. It's about people who have more mature problems. It contains a great deal more complexities. I know the characters. I know the audience. Target audience is something that I've always struggled with because up until this past year, I didn't really understand how to apply it in the actual writing of the book. Now that I know that better and I know how to differentiate and to categorize in my mind, this is how I write for adult, this is how I write for YA, this is how I write for middle grade, it feels more true to the story that I wanted to tell. The story that I am now working on revising for the book that I failed at for 3 years is very much more true to the story that I wanted to tell than it was for those 3 years. Project Ether was already there, so I had to step up. So there you have it. Another thing that I knew better was my characters. For those 3 years, I was still working on getting to know my characters and not just my main character, because I feel like my main character I knew fairly well. But I realized halfway through writing the book that my main character was not very likable, and that was because the wonderful good things about this character that I knew in my head and their true motives and their true intentions were not showing through on the paper. All that we were seeing was the faults and the flaws that were just so much easier to write about. But even more than that, the minor characters I didn't know very well. I didn't know the villain at all. Like, the villain was a complete mystery to me. Honestly, still is a little bit. And so there was no way for me to make it personal, for me to jab into the emotions of the characters because I didn't know them. With Project Ether, I know these characters forwards and backwards. My main character is a character that I've actually been working on since I was 14 years old. So I know this character inside and out. The main character's love interest in the story I know completely well because I've been working with them inside and out for however many years. The sub-villains, the minor villains that are coming in and causing chaos when the major villain can't play a bigger part, they are so well fleshed out. I know all their motives and their conflicts and their goals. I know so much more about them. And as we've been writing through, the relationships between the characters have been developing in ways that they never did with the other ones. And in the Coastlander books, it just felt like I was trying to make these relationships happen because I didn't know the characters. In Project Ether, I know the characters. I know them so well. I feel like they're my friends or my real life enemies. And so I can write about them with confidence and I can know how to tell the story. It also made me look forward to writing about them. With Coastlander, I didn't always look forward to writing from certain people's perspectives because I didn't know them or I didn't like writing from their perspectives. With Project Ether, we originally started with fewer perspectives and now we have more because we needed the extra perspective on what was happening because our main characters couldn't be everywhere. And I'm so in love with the other characters that we're writing from that it is a delight and a joy for me to write from their perspectives. It excites me. I would get to a point in a scene where I was like, I needed to keep going, but I was feeling dried up. I was like, but if I get to finish this scene, I get to write this scene from their perspective. So knowing the characters, knowing the relationships, feeling like I had a great deal of confidence in that area was a huge game changer. Another thing that I knew about my story was what made it interesting. With the Coastlander project, I am still trying to figure out what the main point of the story is, what the main goal of the main character is, and how it interweaves with the external plot, and why it's interesting, why we care about this story. With Project Ether, I knew from the get-go, from the very premise of the story, exactly what I wanted to write about, and exactly what emotions I wanted to discover, and what themes I wanted to explore. I knew what I wanted and what was going to make this story interesting and exciting to other readers. Because of that, I was interested and excited to write it because it was interesting and exciting. If your story doesn't have that special something, it can be very difficult to write. I found it for Snow Dust. It took a while, but I did find it for Littlehood, even though that first draft is still terrible. And with Project Ether, I've had it since, again, the very premise of the story. With Coastlander, I'm still working on finding what exactly it is, and it's going to take quite a bit of time. And now that I know that, I am okay with it. But it took me 3 years of writing it, or 2 years of writing it, however long it's been, to really figure that out and to get it clean on the paper. An additional element of something that I knew in regards to story was I knew my plot beats. I knew my scene outlines. I knew what was happening in every part of the story, and more importantly, I knew what purpose each of those scenes served. So the plot beats helped me to revolutionize my writing because now I understood the purpose of every scene. I wasn't writing any more filler material. I wasn't writing any more fluff to just kind of make things happen. I no longer felt like my subplots were just loose ends kind of flapping in the breeze. Every single scene tied up something. Every single scene served some greater purpose. And ultimately, I understood my story better because of it, and I knew what was coming next, and I was excited to write about it because there were no filler scenes, because there were no scenes that were just like, there were some scenes that I was less excited about than others. The action scenes I really struggled with because I do not write action scenes very well. It takes me a long time to think through the logistics and figure out where everybody is and figure out what the heck they're doing. I really struggle with that. But I still knew what I had to write, and I still knew what was coming afterward. Now, once we got past the 50K, we kind of took a break because neither one of us really knew what was happening at the climax and resolution of the book very well. So, in fact, if you've seen the last vlog that I posted, I talked about there was an 8-word sentence that was all of the description that I had for a scene that I needed to write to finish the 50,000 words. And it literally said, this person does this thing. And I was like, help me out a little bit, please. So obviously, like, that part of it was not figured out, and that's when we had to stop. And I'm glad that I got the 50,000 done before that point, because that would have been quite tragic if I had ended there. But now I know for next time, just go ahead and do all the plot beats so that you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I knew all the scenes, I knew what was coming, and I could look through my outline and say, okay, this is going to happen. There was still tons of room for improv, tons of room for figuring things out. I continued to change things in the outline as I wrote and just adjust things here and there that weren't working for the story or for the characters, but I knew what was coming. I knew every single scene and their purpose, so I had a confidence in telling that story, and I was excited to write every scene as they came. I didn't have to sit and stare at a blank page and wonder. With Coastlander, I kind of sort of had that, but without the purpose. I knew what needed to happen next, but I didn't know why it needed to happen, and I didn't have an excitement for it because it felt forced. All of it felt forced, and I was still trying to figure out the bad guy's endgame. I was still trying to figure out the hero's big moment. I was still trying to figure all of that out, and I didn't know what any of it was supposed to be like. So there was that. Another thing that I think made a huge difference was my timing. So I already mentioned that I had my writing schedule set up. I was already into my writing routine. And I was doing pretty well. But something that I did and that Chalise also did that we both feel really set us up for success was we pushed for to have the first 10K words written the first weekend. So I set up the idea of this 10K writing challenge for Friday, just hoping that I would get, past my initial goal of, I think it was, my card's up there in the wall. 2,381 words was my daily goal. I wanted to get a minimal of double that. So Friday, I think I only got in like 5,000 something words, but the next day I was able to push even harder, and I did end up having 10,000 words by the end of that weekend, which was huge. I wasn't even planning on writing any day but Friday, and yet I ended up writing 10,000 words the first weekend. That got me so far ahead of myself, like of my own writing schedule and NaNoWriMo's, that on days when I didn't have it in me, or I was sick, because I did get sick in the middle of NaNoWriMo also, or when I just was exhausted and there was just nothing left to write, and that happened several times, I was okay. I knew to just give myself the day, or to just write fewer words than I thought that I needed to, because I didn't have that pressure of, oh, I'm like writing only the minimal amount, I gotta keep up with it, or even I'm doing double, but now all of a sudden I've fallen so far behind. For me, at that point, I was so far ahead that even on a day where I only got 481 words, I still got 481 words, and I was so high up at that point that it didn't really make that much of a difference if I only missed it one day. I was also able to take a couple days off. It was so nice to have that jump on NaNoWriMo and just to, excuse me, just to get going early and to get so far ahead that I didn't have to worry about falling behind. Part of the problem, particularly in 2017 and 2018, was just falling behind. Once I had fallen behind, it was impossible for me to get ahead, and I would just give up. I would just give up because I was done. And that did not happen this year because I was so far ahead that I was inspired. Like, oh, I've only got this much left to do this. Oh, I've only got this. Look how far ahead I am. I could do better than this. And I was just like this inspiration constantly of positive pushing forward instead of feeling guilty and like a failure, which has always been a struggle for me. Instead, I was feeling confident. I was feeling excited. And then again, I could take a day off now and then. I took several days off. I was able to lay sick in bed on a Sunday afternoon and not feel pressured to have to write words because I knew that it was okay. I was already so far ahead. Last, but quite probably most, was I had a writer buddy doing Nano with me. Now, I had the same writing friend and partner and critique person and all that since I was 14 years old. That's when we originated the story. But she was not participating in NaNoWriMo at the same time as me, since either one of us got married, had our families, etc., etc. This past year has been the first year that both of us have been working on projects steadily, and this NaNoWriMo was the first year that both of us did NaNoWriMo together. Now, I'm not saying that that is like, if I hadn't had her, I couldn't have done this, because I believe that maybe I could have. But I don't think that I would have done it quite as well. I don't think part of what kept me going was knowing that she was doing it with me, knowing that she was writing, knowing that she was trying to get her word counts in, and even occasionally a little bit of friendly competition, like seeing, oh, Chalise made it up to 30,000 today. I'm at this number. Could I maybe make it up there too? Like, I need to be catching up. I need to be doing better. And like pushing and pushing. In fact, we finished the same night. We both completed NaNoWriMo on Thursday. I think technically I finished a few hours earlier than her, but that's because I'm in a different time zone than she is. And so like, we both wrote after our kids were to bed. My kids were just to bed earlier than hers because of the time difference. So I think that's the only reason that I finished before she did, was just that time difference thing, because we were like pretty much neck and neck the whole night. In fact, I was a part of a small group of NaNoWriMo people, and all of us were trying to do it together, and it was very inspiring and encouraging to see them too, to also be excited, and hopefully to feel like I was encouraging and inspiring them back. So having a writer buddy who was doing it at the same time as me was huge. Working on the same project was awesome, but I don't think that that's what it was necessarily. I think that that helped, but I don't think that's what it was that made it. I think that it was working together at the same time, and, you know, constantly looking for that next chapter that they wrote, constantly be sending chapters out that I wrote. That made a huge difference. Overall, I believe that what set me apart this year was mindset. The last few years, I was in a really bad place mentally and emotionally, where I was constantly feeling guilty and like a failure. And over the past year, my mindset has shifted so much. And I'm giving God all the praise for that, because I've been praying about it for years. And over this past year, he just gave me so many friends and people around me who knew about depression and anxiety, and who knew about, you know, that constant feeling of failure, and they were encouraging me to choose not to feel that way about myself, and to choose not to let my thought patterns go down certain bunny trails. And while it took a long time for that to become a habit, now while I still have bad days, especially when regards to my house or my health, I don't have the same fallback that I did 2 years ago or even last year. My mindset has shifted so much from a mindset of failure to a mindset of success, and a mindset of just peace and being okay if this doesn't happen or this doesn't happen. Because you know what? God's got it in control. I'm not a failure. I'm doing my best, and that's enough. It has been, and I am not anyone, I am not a doctor or a psychiatrist or a counselor. So this is just me saying I found peace this year. I know it will be tested and tried again and again and again. That's life. But this year, a large portion was not that the stress levels weren't there, even though they were lessened. It was that my mindset has been shifting. My brain, I'm working on rewiring it to focus not on the failure, but to focus on God, to focus on my self-care, to focus on the joy of having my family near me. So that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that this video has been encouraging and inspiring. Just looking back over this year at all of the differences between this year and the last 3 years has been like a mind-blowing experience for me, and just realizing how far I have come in my writing journey. 3 years ago, I was just really starting to view writing as a career and as a valid option for me to really be publishing and to really be writing books that other people would read. I hope that wherever you are on your writer journey, that this video has inspired you to continue writing, maybe encouraged you, given you some tips. NaNoWriMo is not the only month of the year that we write, and so I am definitely planning on using all the things that I have learned from this Nano in January and February and so on and so forth in my 2020 writing schedule. I hope that you have had an amazing Nano. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. That goes a long way to support me and my channel. And again, consider subscribing on the way out. I do post videos every Saturday about writing and fantasy and series writing and a lot of writing vlogs and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. You can go check me out on social media. I post to Instagram all the time about my own personal writing updates, these videos, writing advice, life stuff, writer life stuff. I'm also semi-active on Facebook, and I sometimes pop on Twitter and Pinterest, but mostly on Instagram. So those links are all in the description box below, as well as my website and all that fun stuff. There are some videos coming up very soon about my 2020 publishing schedule, so be sure to check out those when they come out. Again, that notification bell is going to let you know as soon as they pop up. I will also be releasing a video soon about my newsletter and what is going on with that, because that has been a mess this year, and I am planning on cleaning it up for 2020, so keep your eyes out for that as well. I hope you all have an amazing rest of the weekend writing, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!